This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is Matteo Rizzi. I'm the executive producer of the show. And today we have a sort of outside the box episode that we wanted to call From Room to Zoom. I will explain in a little while why we decided to gave this theme today. But before, I wanted to first introduce my two fellow co-hosts. So, Paolo, hi, welcome to the show. And Jason, hi.
Hi, Matteo. Hi, everybody.
Jason today is clearly not alone. He is connecting from the U.S., but he's actually one of the founder of the whole Provoke Media shows. So it's okay. We can forgive him for sure.
Matteo, so it is not yet my daughter, but I will warn everyone there's going to be an extra listening fee if they get serenaded with Let It Go from Frozen. Intermixed, so interesting times in the world of COVID.
Great. Thank you, Jason. So back to the show, and it's time now to introduce our fellow guests. I will start by asking them to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Raza Karapanza from EBS University of Business and Law. Raza, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matteo, for inviting me. My name is Russia. It's pronounced like the country. I'm not from Russia, actually, originally. That's just how my name is pronounced. And yes, I come from Wiesbaden, from EBS Business School, where I serve as Vice Dean Education and Finance Professor.
Thank you, Russia, and sorry for mispronouncing your name in the first place. As of now, it won't happen again. So Jennifer Tesher from Financial Health Network, calling from Chicago. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I am calling in from Chicago today, and I run the Financial Health Network, which really equips businesses to really help improve the financial health of their customers, their employees, and their communities.
Thank you, Jennifer. Stefano from Italy, Stefano Rizzo, CEO and founder of Newired. Hey, Stefano, welcome.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Thanks for having me today. I'm Stefano Rizzo. I'm the founder in Newired, and my background is a technical one. I've been developing products since some 20 years plus. And what we do now is we provide a B2B solution to guide users into the digital nightmare. So digital adoption solution, Newired.
Thank you, Stefano. It is actually a great segue to briefly introduce the theme of the day before giving the floor to Paolo for the sort of introductory question. From room to Zoom. So this particular context worldwide sort of imposed us to sort of fill the digital gap in everything from setting up a teleconference up to giving our children the possibility to keep sort of a following lesson, and vice versa to the teacher to quickly organize a digital course. But even some more sort of basic digital skills, especially for the elderly, and people who are not so used to sort of operate on these terms on a day-to-day basis. So the room sort of symbolizes the real life, where we actually can meet, and hopefully it will happen again soon in real life with real people. To Zoom, to symbolizes this whole new digital paradigm that, most of us are all of a sudden dragged into. Today, the 3 billion people are quarantined technically, and the demand for digital services of all sorts has increased dramatically. So that's today's discussion, isn't it, Paolo?
Absolutely. So it is complex for many people to work from home. It is very difficult to reach out to students when you cannot go to the classroom. But we decided today to bring on the Breaking Banks Europe stage some guests that want to share with us their experience. And therefore, I want to start with Raja Karapanza, who is the Vice Dean of EBS Business School in Wiesbaden, also Professor of Finance. And the reason is because Raja is hosting my fintech classes in the Wiesbaden classroom, but I could not get to Wiesbaden these days because also in Germany there is a lockdown. So what we decided was to facilitate video classrooms. So we brought everybody from the room to the Zoom. That's why we called this episode From Room to Zoom. And therefore, I would like to ask Raja how they got to this decision and how could they implement that so fast? Because in less than 1 week, we got the whole business school on Zoom. And I have to tell you, I had a wonderful experience sharing with 35 students on Zoom last week. And I'm actually thinking, do I want to go back to the room again? Raja, what is your point of view?
Okay, so let me start like this. In a sense, we prepared for this. So we were kind of expecting that the closure will come. So it didn't really happen overnight. We were preparing for 3 weeks to the switch from room to Zoom because we have seen what has happened in other countries. So in a sense, Germany was lucky enough not to be the first country to experience the COVID-19 exposure. And we have seen how other universities in more affected and earlier affected places have been reacting. So we've been preparing for this. And then once the time came, we did a switch. And I actually have to say, I'm really proud how it all worked. Basically, in the first 2 weeks of online lectures, we rescheduled only 3 out of more than 240 classes and just moved them for 1 or 2 days, which all happens in the normal classrooms as well. I wouldn't say it was even more. And what I'm also impressed with is class attendance. I would say students attend classes even more now than they would normally because there is never 100% attendance. Now, when it comes to the fact whether we are going to go back to classroom ever, I'm very opinionated on this topic. I think that we will. And the main reason being is that students don't go to university just to learn classes or just to learn equations or things like these, but also to grow up in a sense. When you see first semester students entering our classrooms, they're basically kids which are picking their noses. Once they go out of the classrooms, they are adults. And I think that growing up on campus, actually, if you had an opportunity to see my background, this is our beautiful castle that on the Rhine River with the vineyard. I think that growing up in an environment like this compared to growing up in your parents' childhood room in front of a computer is a very, very different experience. So I don't think that they could successfully actually grow up just not leaving their childhood room. In addition to that, I think that also some wonderful things happen in the interactions which happen in the classroom. Of course, you can interact on Zoom as well, but not in the same way as if you party together, if you study together, if you eat together, if you do all kind of social activities together. Actually, Paul Graham in he writes these beautiful essays. Paul Graham, founder of Y Combinator, and he has this great essay, How to Start a Startup, and there he states that universities could teach students in the classroom campfire songs as long as the recruiting would do the same level of recruiting. And if you put these smart people together, beautiful things come out of it just because they're together.
One of the challenges we face in the United States, though, still, and I'm wondering if it's as pervasive, is what we call the digital divide. And even in 2020, something on the order of 22% of 3 to 18-year-olds don't have access to broadband. And Jennifer, I know you and I have spoken about this in the past. The implications of lack of access to high-speed internet has implications for health, for learning, for financial inclusion. I'm curious, are you seeing that same leap to digital that Russia just said, they were experienced, at least in higher education?
So I think you're right that there's a real challenge, not with, do I have a device? At this point, lots of people have devices, but the question is, what kind of access to the internet or to broadband do they have? In many cases, for lower income people, their phone is their only computer. So they don't have the option of doing certain things by phone and other things by computer. I think the other issue is that for a lot of low income people, they are buying minutes. They're not on an unlimited plan. So they also have to really think carefully about how they use the access that they have. Having said that, particularly during this crisis right now, I think a lot of the broadband providers are doing a lot to try to expand access. They have opened up Wi-Fi hotspots all over the country. They are giving away basic plans for free or for extremely low amounts of money. So I think it's a problem, but I don't think it's the problem it would have been 10 years ago. I think we've made significant inroads. There is one other aspect, though. I think rural America is really, in some ways, most challenged because there are still places in this country where broadband doesn't reach at all. And those communities are also the ones that are least likely to have the kind of physical assets or banking assets in their communities. And they're going to be particularly challenged by the economic downturn that we're experiencing as a result of the coronavirus. So, in some ways, those are the communities that I'm most concerned about.
Jennifer, actually, if I may jump in here, it is super interesting that you're stressing the broadband and the network aspect, and that means that we sort of picked the guest well because Stefano, actually, you are tackling rather, I want to say the digital. I don't want to say incapacity, but maybe sloppiness or like a lack of culture, and you and I talked about this like a week ago, sort of witnessing the problem of our own child being able to connect, or like explaining how Netflix, works to my parents who are sort of, completely locked for now 4 weeks. And you decided to sort of give it a go, tackling the like user experience, right? With a sort of an evolution of Newired. Explain us a little bit what the idea was.
It's again a kind of a digital divide. There is a digital divide that comes from infrastructure, which is definitely the base of communication. But we are living into digital transformation that most of the services become digital. But now this, what's happening in the world, transform the transformation into an emergency. So we have a digital emergency. So we need to reach people with the broadband, yes, but also enable them. The story is that I can witness, it's pretty easy. My elder son is 16 years old. A couple of weeks ago told me, I spent the whole day on the phone enabling my friends at school in using Google Drive because our professor want to share their PowerPoints, their content, and there is no way to do that with the email. So I was trying to help them on the phone, enabling into Google Drive. Not a big deal, I would say. So I thought, well, we have a technology that businesses use to onboard their users into their applications, SaaS applications like Salesforce, just an example, or Workday, or stuff like that. And why don't we open this up in a kind of B2C environment? So why don't we create some content that can drive users in adopting technologies they urgently need now? Actually, it's a kind of step-by-step guidance, in-place guidance into web applications that you just download an extension to your browser, and then magically your browser will help you in setting up a Zoom chat or in placing a video call for elder people that want to see their nephews, or to help professors in creating a Google Classroom, or many use cases like this. The idea evolved in a way that we accept contribution by anybody. Anybody can create guidance for other users. This is a free service that we are giving to the community. Just because here in Italy, we are a little bit ahead in the process, and we feel that this divide, once you overcome the connection issue, then you have a cultural issue that needs, in some cases, to be overcome.
The aging piece of this, especially now, where now more than ever, they need some of those services, changing that mindset and doing it remotely simultaneously really does pose an issue. In Russia, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think that probably one of the best inventions that helped actually people that are not technically savvy and which unfortunately disappeared recently is a home button, the iPhone or on the iPad. Whenever I had, let's say before the iPad phase, when my parents would be struggling with their computer, it was a PC, I had to use like TeamViewer or something like that to manually take over the control and fix stuff. Then Apple came with the home button and they just press a home button and everything is fixed. And now the home button is gone. And I will never forgive Apple for removing the home button from their devices.
Okay, Raja, staying a moment with you. As you said that clearly it is also important for people to meet with people, especially students, because they need to learn how to collaborate in real life, not just on digital. Yet these days, we are all asked to socialize more and more using the digital medium. Now, I felt that during my classroom, the students were a bit more engaged compared to the real life classroom I had last year and the year before. I'm not sure why. I saw questions coming through the chat box. Some of them were interacting on the video as if you like, the distance might reduce some of the anxiety that you might have in the classroom in order to speak with the teacher. I don't know whether you already collected some feedback from the students about the last couple of weeks of digital engagement.
So what we also observe is that, I think that we should put the things into perspective of these kids. These kids grew up digitally. And, when they are asking questions and when they are asking them in a chat, for them, this is a natural way of asking questions because they grew up with YouTubers and having fireside chats with YouTubers. I think that the way communication has changed and has fundamentally changed the world in which we live. Let me give you another example. So if you observe now the generation that is entering the universities now, so basically teenagers, end of their teenage years, entering the university now, when they are asked to fill in on Facebook, like a category, Facebook relationship, they will have a completely different concept to this category than we do. For me, this will be my wife. So for somebody, that will be their girlfriend or boyfriend. But for kids growing up now, it's actually a completely separate category. They have a real life relationship and they will have a Facebook relationship. My interpretation of that is that they started having Facebook relationships before having real life relationships. And my impression is that they have grew up in a completely different environment, and for them interaction on internet is a more natural way to some extent than actually asking questions publicly in the classroom. And this could be the reason why they're so active, especially on chat. I mean, chat in my lecture is like burning, like literally on YouTube channels with YouTubers, like fireside chats. This is how they behave.
So, Raja, what about the other side of the digital divide? We have the kids, they are digitally enabled, but we also had the teachers, the professors. So I saw that you've been running every day, like courses and meetings online for them to share their experience. Is there any story that you want to share with us, or what is your takeaway from this experience?
I mean, they're actually, so basically what we have done is before we started with moving everything to Zoom, we have first had training sessions for all the faculty, how to use Zoom, how to use advanced features like polls, sharing the screen or chat or different things that you can do on Zoom, like splitting students in group and discussing. And what struck me the most is that at the beginning, people were not so enthusiastic about it, but as the first, second, third lecture came about, people became very, very enthusiastic. And there are of course many anecdotes from these as we call them reflection sessions that we hold now like 3 times a week. And actually this helped get faculty much closer to each other. I would say this is probably the unintended outcome of that. But some of the experiences funny that we have had, I mean funny that, for example, one professor was complaining that in one session a student came to the lecture in the bathroom. And of course, this is a bit of a surprise. And then even he had his girlfriend joining him and listening the lecture. But, these are teenagers. Their brains work differently. Brains, grow up as well. I think we shouldn't be as strict. Of course, we should help them get this netiquette and behavior in line with the normal classroom, basically, even though these are not normal times in any way. But I would say probably the most important thing that we have done in these sessions, both with students and with us, is actually to talk about the whole situation of the COVID-19, which is a very, very unusual situation in which all we are currently. And I grew up through different things, like 3 wars, 2 wars in ex-Yugoslavia, 1 war in Beirut in Lebanon. I was even in SARS in Hong Kong. And then a friend of mine who grew up through wars as well, he was doing his PhD in Caltech, and he went to Caltech's psychologist, and he started complaining how he's under lots of pressure. And then he told to the psychologist all the stories, what happened to him during his life. And he said, but I think that this hasn't really influenced me. And then the psychologist said, well, do you understand that this is not normal? What I'm trying to say, we are living through very, very difficult times. After this whole thing is over, we will be different. The world will be a different place. I cannot tell you how, but it will be a different place. And
Well,
I think
Raja, I
we
would
should
say
talk
that
about it.
I didn't drinking red wine in the Zoom classroom. I'm not sure whether they will do the same in the room in Wiesbaden. I see you have the vineyards at your back where the university is located. I think you want to wrap it up for a second. We have a little break, right, Matteo? And we get back right after to continue the conversation.
Yes, indeed. And actually, Rasha, I think that you're dealing with, also to sort of introduce the second half of the show, you're dealing with some sort of very, technology aware type of people. I will be curious to sort of have a comparative sort of conversation with Jennifer and Stefano when we talk about family, that are not so, I want to say, financially included or maybe underbanked, as well as for like a very young and sort of much older people with Stefano. But indeed, it's time for a short break. Stay with us. It's a wrap.
FinTech Stage builds innovation ecosystems. We engage incumbents, investors, entrepreneurs, technology partners, and regulators to build trusted and connected FinTech tribes around the world. We firmly believe that innovation in financial services will improve people's lives. Through our immersive programs, we connect global industry experts with local financial services communities to explore, challenge, and solve important issues related to FinTech, RegTech, InsurTech, artificial intelligence, identity, and financial inclusion. The good news is that we have done it before. InnoTribe was the first and largest fintech movement worldwide, and our founders were amongst its orchestrators. We build programs with a wise combination of formats, partnerships, and content. It is experience-based, tailor-made, and proven to deliver results. Visit us at fintechstage.com or feel free to send an email to operations@fintechstage.com for more information.
Hey guys, welcome back to the From Room to Zoom second half of the show. Today is actually a particular occasion because we do have, a guest and a host connecting from the US, Jason, who is also the co-founder of Provoke.fm, who is like our common mom for all the podcasts of the group, including Breaking Banks Europe. Jason, you had an interesting question in the break, and you wanted to bring Jennifer, explain us how is the situation and the work of the Financial Health Association.
This whole idea of the roam to Zoom brings up an interesting issue because we think about the idea of digital brings about ubiquity and fairness, but we're talking about digital divide. And one of the interesting things the Financial Health Network does is tries to really solve across the board with a lot of corporate involvement. How do we actually solve divides in financial inclusion, financial health, regular health and wellness now? And I think we're going to find probably part of this begins to expand, what is that role of broadband? So Jennifer, if you would, for a lot of the European listeners, maybe you could describe what the Financial Health Network does, over the course of over a decade now, and what you guys have accomplished and where you're headed.
Absolutely. Actually, it's been 16 years next month. So when we started, we were actually called the Center for Financial Services Innovation, CFSI. And this was 2004. So this was the year Google went public. It was the year that Mark Zuckerberg invented the Facebook in his dorm room, but we didn't yet have the iPhone. But we could already see that the internet was going to create enormous opportunity to reach with financial products and services those who'd been left out. And so we were founded to really shine a spotlight on the needs of the un- and underbanked and to really find ways to leverage technology to bring them into the fold. And if you fast forward then about 10 years, a lot changed. First, the iPhone was invented. I wish I could say that I saw that coming, but I didn't. And that was a game changer. So that coupled with a prepaid card meant, I'm painting with a broad brush, but meant that largely everyone was included, that inclusion or access was nearly ubiquitous. We also had a financial crisis, which led a lot of people to question whether that bank account was so good for you in the first place. And then we had a great recession in which it became clear that this wasn't just the problem of a small niche group of people who didn't have a bank account. This was millions upon millions of Americans, frankly, the majority of Americans who were living paycheck to paycheck, who were really struggling financially. And that had been in the making over the course of a couple of decades. And we missed it because we were gathering the wrong data and we were thinking incorrectly about the problem. And it was at that point that we said to ourselves, what are we all about? And we decided that really what we cared about was improving people's financial lives. And that while access is important, it's insufficient, and that we should really be focused on this idea of financial health. We invented that. We didn't really know what it meant. So we've spent the last 6+ years building a definition and a framework and a measurement methodology for what is financial health. What does it mean to be financially healthy? We now have an annual financial health pulse, which measures financial health in America. We've created a financial health score, and we are gathering data that allows us to view year on year how people's financial health is changing and what kinds of products or policies or interventions can move the needle on people's financial health. And we're working with dozens of financial services companies and increasingly now employers who are actually regularly measuring the financial health of their own customers and in some cases their employees. And we think that, at the end of the day, you measure what you manage. And so when we think about issues of the digital divide, what this conversation has largely been about, we think about how one's engagement with and access to digital banking, digital financial services might impede someone's ability to manage their day-to-day finances in a way that builds resilience and enables them to pursue opportunity. And it's not just about, can I get online? It's how much of my life do I live online? Am I still operating in the cash economy? Am I creating a digital footprint that would enable fintech companies, banks, and others to really help me optimize my decision making by analyzing all of the data that's out there about me? And so while I'm very mindful of privacy and fraud issues and other concerns around being online, I do think that the benefits, outweigh the costs. And there's so much we can do to help people better manage their own financial health when they are really operating largely in the digital financial world.
What you said, Jennifer, resonates a lot, and all of a sudden brought back, all the work that we were doing with the Media Network, an organization that you certainly know well, because they're actually both dealing in emerging markets, particularly focused on financial inclusion, but they are very much conscious of the fact that, being underbanked or unbanked is also pretty much a matter for developed markets, and in premise the United States. So it resonates completely. And what I wanted to sort of bridge this conversation with is that, so Rasha before spoke about the students of its university that are certainly, technologically savvy enough to, not be in need of any guidance or whatsoever to access to these financial services. And Jennifer underlined that almost the financial literacy gap, for people to become smarter and clever in managing their money, which is like a huge vertical in this sort of digital education. But I was thinking, and that's a question for Stefano, who do you think is the target market for this application that you have conceived? Are they like the younger, like the teenager or below teenager, not geeky person, and everyone's mom and dad who are now trying to reach out and order food and are confined? I mean, what did you have in mind when you thought about doing this?
The financial inclusion is very similar to digital inclusion. So what Jennifer was describing before is a part of the problem or the desire of including people, definitely. So being financially included means that you can access online services, you can buy food online, definitely, because if you don't have a credit card or you're not enabled from the financial perspective in accessing different services is an issue. But we still see in many parts of the world, and of course, US is pretty advanced in this regard, but both in Europe and in Asia, maybe in Africa also, there is a lot of people that is not daily with the technology at hand. So we have probably different classes of users in the world. And what was really immediately logical to me after we were locked in our houses here in Europe was that I was not able to have a call with my father. He is 87 years old, and he doesn't have a mobile phone, for example, or they can access a computer, but I wanted to place an hangout with him or just Google Duo meeting. And it was taking 2 hours describing the user interface there, and then try this, what do you see? And this was one. Other case was another friend of mine. She's a teacher at primary school, and her children are from 5 to 10 years old, and they had to be guided in order to access a Zoom classroom. So these were the people that we had in mind first, saying, I also want to connect with the iPhone home button. Why we need one single button that somebody can press asking for help, and then we can have an help which is a legacy one or traditional one, which means that somebody calls you, explains again how to deal with that, or you download a manual, or you see a video tutorial, or you can have a next generation help, which is in-place guidance, which is the technology we provide companies with in a B2B environment. So this is a kind of B2C help. You press the single button, you go to Newired.com, one single button, press that, and from then on, what would you like to do? Place a call and see my nephews, see my grandchildren, or organize a classroom. And everything is guided for you dynamically in your browser, including not just technically, but from an enablement perspective, become savvy in be able to access some basic things, order food, My mother-in-law, she has issues because she cannot get out home, and she wants to order grocery, simply having that delivered at home. And she has a computer, but she doesn't know how to put her credit card information inside. That's it.
I'm curious, Jennifer, from your perspective, this idea of both high tech and high touch is, a great way to solve in some of the developing parts of the world. Can you talk about some of the things that are being done in other parts of the world that don't necessarily have those kinds of resources? How are they using technology to address both the digital divide and the inclusion divide?
Stefano, when you were talking, what I was really thinking about was that this is in some ways less of a technology issue and more of a UX experience kind of issue. What happened to the idea of technology being obvious, where you didn't need the guide? They don't give you a handbook anymore because it's supposed to be easy. And I think that as the options have grown greater, we've lost a little bit of that. There's always going to be an older generation that is a little bit behind the curve, right? I kind of wonder, at what point will technology evolution slow to a point where we don't have so much of a generational divide around comfort with technology? But for now, we'll always have that. So when you and I are your father's age, God willing, right? I think about what's going to be the issue that's going to be complicated for us. There will be something for sure that we don't know how to do. We do an annual conference called Emerge. And last year, I talked about this issue of high tech and high touch, that technology is meant to be an enabler. It's not the solution in and of itself. And that we talked about this earlier on the show, that people do need and value human engagement. And how can we leverage technology to enable that kind of human engagement? And I gave the example of a company called Care.Coach. And what they do is they provide essentially internet based pets. It's an avatar they put on a little iPad. You click a button, and it's for older people who cannot get out of their house. And maybe their caregiver needs to go to the grocery or needs a break, or maybe they don't have a caregiver. The avatar connects with someone in a call center, a trained health professional who can kind of check in on this person. There's a wide angle camera on it so they can see what the person's doing. They can chat and talk to that person through the voice of and the picture of the avatar. They can make sure that person's taking their medicine. They can show them pictures from their life. They can play their favorite music. It's really like a virtual caregiver, but the caregivers are actually behind the scenes. So not only is it helping real caregivers, it's dramatically reducing the cost. Now, this would be disturbing to me if this were the only human touch that these folks were getting, but usually it's supplemented by someone who comes once or twice a week to check on that person. And so I think this is just a terrific example of how we can really use technology to blend tech and touch. And I think that's true regardless of whether it's a developed country, a developing country. Everyone needs that human engagement. I just think that the difference there is both what kind of pipes or rails have you got and cost, and then certainly local customs. But I think that the idea of having the button where you immediately get a video chat with someone who can help, that was the big deal years ago when Amazon started selling the tablets. I remember those commercials on TV. It was all about being able to just at an instant click the button and have a live video chat with someone who could help you. And I think that's going to be increasingly important.
Well, if I can say something here, I'm thinking that being digitally comfortable doesn't necessarily mean that we can be comfortable in playing our banking and finances on digital, because there is another type of divide, which is a biological divide. I always like to remind that the mobile digital technology is a technology of the demand, is pull technology. So typically you go there because you know what you want or you're self-motivated to do something. Very few people are self-motivated when it comes to kind of financial decisions. That's why most of the high-value banking services and insurance services are push-oriented for the good and for the bad. That means they need to be supplied. So if there is something that the coronavirus outbreak is teaching us, It's not necessarily that digital is the way to resolve this problem of the country's lockdowns, but the relationships are very important, also in banking. So anything that on digital enables us to augment, enrich, facilitate the relationship is what will really generate value going forward. So Matteo, I guess that we reached the end of the Breaking Banks Europe today, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was a very interesting show because we got a very different point of views from the digitally enabled and tech-savvy German classrooms to the digital divide that Jennifer was bringing on stage, and Stefano discussing the relevance of the user experience, how to facilitate people to interact in a different way compared to the past. I would actually call for a wrap-up if the guests don't have a last opinion to share.
Thank you, Paolo. I could not have done a better wrap-up. So thank you for my fellow co-host. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Jason. And thanks a lot, Rasha, Jennifer, and Stefano for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.